Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the show. Sorry for the hiatus. I just kind of got busy with life and had a lot going on. But, anyways, I'm back. I hope your seasons are going well. And, a lot of you have your fantasy championship this week if you're still in. So, good luck to you guys. Anyway, I had a list here of important lessons that we learned from the 2022 season. And I'm going to be giving you a list of these lessons and how we're going to sort of incorporate them into the 2023 season to help us improve in fantasy football and improve our team. So I'm going to get right into it with the first thing on my list. And this is something I noticed this year that changed immensely in fantasy football. And that is that wide receivers are getting targeted way more. The absolute high-end target share for the high-end wide receivers is absolutely through the roof. I mean, it's really not uncommon for wide receivers to, on average, receive like 11 or 12 targets a game. Like on average, guys like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, the super high volume, Stephon Diggs, Jamar Chase, the super high volume wide receivers. It's not uncommon for them to see 15 targets in a game. So what this has done is it's essentially made the wide receiver position arguably more important than the running back positions for PPR leagues. Certainly not for standard leagues, but for PPR leagues, the wide receiver position is arguably more important now. And I've always been a running back biased person, but considering the fact that the target share is up so much for wide receivers, I think that in next year's draft, we're going to see a lot of wide receivers taken with the first overall pick, second overall pick, third overall pick. There's actually a chance that the top 5 overall picks are all wide receivers in next year's draft, and this is very much because of the fact that wide receivers get targeted so heavily now. It becomes more and more of a passing league every year, and so with that being the case, you might want to plan on taking somebody like Justin Jefferson or Stephon Diggs with the first overall pick next season. I never thought I would be saying this in my life, to take a wide receiver over a running back with the first pick in fantasy, but considering the ridiculously increased target share, I think that we need to start thinking about taking wide receivers before elite running backs. Next on my list is that you really just absolutely cannot predict injuries. Now, if you told me going into the season that, Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey would play an entire injury-free season, I would tell you you're crazy. I actually made a video last offseason talking about avoiding drafting injury-prone players, but I think this season has been kind of a lesson for us that we really can't predict injuries whatsoever. Who would have predicted that Javonte Williams would be out early and miss the whole season? DeAndre Swift would miss a large chunk of the season, and yet Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey would be healthy all year. I would have told you that's crazy. The other two guys are going to be healthy. They don't really have injury history, but it just shows how random injuries are in fantasy and in the NFL. So you really want to try to avoid, I think, going forward, thinking too much into whether a player is going to be injured in the coming season or not based on their injury history, because injuries just tend to be so random. So from now on, let's not try to overthink the injury situation with players and just draft players based on their floor ceiling combination as opposed to whether or not we think they're going to stay healthy. Next on my list is I really think that tight ends need to be drafted later. Now, anybody that invested a high pick in a tight end this year probably came out disappointed. Guys like Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller, George Kittle until extremely recently have all been very quiet. And with this being the case, I just don't think that the tight end position is consistent enough and provides a high enough ceiling on a weekly basis to justify an early pick. I think it's better to wait on tight ends and take guys like David Njoku later in the draft because they're still going to give you good fantasy value and you don't have to waste an early pick on them. So, unless it's Travis Kelce, you really don't want to reach for a tight end early in the draft. And now that Travis Kelce is getting older, it's going to be harder to justify drafting him on a yearly basis going forward because, we just can't really trust the tight end position to provide elite fantasy numbers unless it's Travis Kelce, and he's like 900 years old now. So I really wouldn't reach too early for a tight end in drafts in the future. Next lesson that we've learned on the year is that I think that every major running back that is part of a split backfield absolutely has to be handcuffed. The 3 examples that I really think of just kind of right off the bat are Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, and Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris. Now, coming into the season, each one of these running backs had the assigned role as the number 1 running back in their offense. Now, I was talking about Ramondre Stevenson and Tony Pollard all offseason because I was saying these guys are going to take over their backfield at some point because they're the better, more talented running back in their backfield. And what happened? Ramondre Stevenson ended up taking the starting job from Damian Harris. And although Tony Pollard hasn't completely taken over the starting job from Zeke, he's essentially the number one running back in the Cowboys backfield now. So, any running back that's part of a split backfield, we have to understand that the way these backfields operate in today's NFL, the backup running back is still going to get a ridiculous amount of volume. And in certain cases, if they're better, they're going to end up taking over the backfield. So anytime you draft a major running back that has an elite handcuff, an elite talent behind them, handcuffing them, it's very important to go ahead and draft the handcuff as well. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon is another example. Aaron Jones has had the better fantasy numbers overall, but in recent weeks, A.J. Dillon has absolutely gone off. So, if you're going to draft these running backs that are part of a split backfield, it is imperative to draft the handcuff running back as well. Next and final thing on my list is that quarterback wide receiver stacks are now way more valuable than they've ever been. Now, I've always enjoyed drafting quarterback wide receiver stacks in fantasy because I think that it makes it extremely entertaining. We know that, if the quarterback and the wide receiver go off in the same week, it can easily win you your week. But in the past, quarterback wide receiver stacks haven't been as consistent due to wide receivers not really being as consistent as the running back position. But now, as dominant as wide receivers are and as dominant as the high-end quarterbacks are in fantasy now, I think that quarterback wide receiver stacks are more valuable than they've ever been. This year, perfect examples are Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, at the times where Ja'Marr Chase has actually been healthy. I mean, these guys come out and they just absolutely win you weeks. So, considering that the quarterback position has a higher ceiling than it's ever had, and considering that the wide receiver position has a higher ceiling than it's ever had due to the increased target share for wide receivers, I think that quarterback wide receiver stacks are now not just a fun thing to draft. I think that they're actually imperative to building a winning fantasy team. So going forward in the future, we're going to be taking quarterbacks earlier in the draft. We're going to be taking wide receivers earlier in the draft, and having an awesome quarterback wide receiver stack like Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown is going to be absolutely imperative to you winning. So those are my lessons for the 2022 season and how we're going to kind of incorporate them in the 2023 season to build an optimal lineup and an optimal team for your fantasy football team in 2023. All right, guys, it is good to be back. I appreciate you tuning into the video, and I will catch you later.